Right, but we're gonna get started with the lunch session. We have Ross, who is in charge of strategic partnerships at Google. He's based in London, and he's gonna present some data that hopefully will help us understand a little bit more about the Google Play ecosystem. And he's gonna present some of the tools that Google is offering for developers. So without further ado, let's get Ross on stage.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and well done on having made it this far. I think it's, you can see there's a slightly more empty floor out that side, slightly more empty room here as well, and I think it's been a very long and very good week for everyone involved. And it's also lunchtime, so I appreciate you coming out to have a chat. What I'm going to run through today is, we can talk about an awful lot of things as Google, but what I wanted to try and touch on was some of the stuff we've seen around individual user trends. We've seen over the last few days a lot of great data about the market and about user behavior in aggregate. Actually, we've done some in-depth user survey results, going down and talking to people individually. And that makes a really nice counterpoint to some of the other statistics we've seen about how much the market is growing and how many more people there are. It's good to look a little bit more detailed about who the people are behind those numbers. And then spend a little bit of time on why we've made some of the changes that we've made as a company to some of our tools, and hopefully that will kind of resonate with you guys and understand why we've made these changes and help you adjust to those, and then hopefully have some time for some questions as well. So the main question I think that I still sometimes get is what does Google actually do for game developers? And there is a short answer and there is a long answer. So what do we actually do for game developers? Well, I think the short answer is four main things that we see ourselves helping you guys do. And one of those is build your game. Generally, help with the infrastructure side of things, help you create a scalable backend, and really not worry too much about how the game's going to be built. Then we help you guys grow your audience. This comes from distribution channels. This comes from user acquisition. On top of that, we can help with engagement, which is making sure your users play more, and we have tools to help guide that and incentivize that. And then on the last part, we help you guys monetize your content, whether that is through building the correct in-app purchase strategy, selling virtual goods, selling upgrades, or whether it's on the ad monetization side of things. So that actually is the short answer. The long answer with all the icons looks a bit like this. And the last time I tried to go through all of this was at GDC in Cologne. It took me 5 colleagues and 7 hours. So I'm not going to do that in detail today. You'll be pleased to hear. Tennille would kill me. So when I actually talk about what we can provide out to you guys, it starts on the infrastructure side with analytics and with Cloud Platform. The Cloud Platform in particular has seen really good uptake amongst mobile developers, unsurprisingly. We live in a world where spikes can be slow trends or they can be Flappy Bird style kind of absolute explosions, and having a scalable backend there is something that works really well for the game developers with whom we've partnered. On the other side, the distribution channels that we can help with, both the Chrome web store and Chrome itself has grown tremendously over the last few years, and then on top of that, the Play Store and Android itself as a vehicle for distributing games to as many users as possible. And then on top of that, we have the ability to help you guys acquire users through the AdMob channels and through AdSense on desktop as well. Within engagement, there's a YouTube aspect, which is, I think, a very underused resource by a lot of game developers. We see tremendous excitement from users, tremendous consumption of game content, both on YouTube and created for YouTube. And that's something that people should really, I think, leverage a bit more. Happy to talk about that afterwards with people if they're interested. It's not the focus, but it's an interesting space. And then we also, on the social side of things, have put a lot of work into the Play Games framework to allow you guys to kind of build a social network and take care of a lot of the basics, like leaderboards and multiplayer side of things without really having to lift too much of a finger. And on the monetization side, I think everyone's familiar with AdMob as a platform and the ability to make in-app payments. So we have all these things, and we keep building these things out, and we're really, really excited about being part of the sector. So why do we do this, though, is the next question, really. We built a whole bunch of tools. I mean, Google builds a whole bunch of things overall, and some questions, robotics-wise, contact lens-wise, etc., are harder to answer why. But on the gaming side of things, why do we build these tools to help developers? I think it's pretty clear, because it's a really exciting space to be in. The very quick view as to why this is exciting is pure dollars. This is the Newzoo data that we should be familiar with about the size of the market. This is non-hardware sales, so software only. We know that we're in a big place, and we know that the growth rates over the coming few years are solid and sustainable and driven by an explosion in platform change across smartphone and across tablet. And Rich's data only went to underscore this again for the nth year running, that there's tremendous growth on those mobile platforms, and it peaks every year. So we've got a whole bunch of new users to play with. It's January, well, February now, and we're in a good situation there. So we should be playing. We should all be involved in this sector and pleased to be around. On top of this, whatever happens, however big we think it all is, we are really only getting started in terms of the transformation of available market and audience into gamers. So this is an estimate of the number of kind of gaming systems that were available running through up to 2009, and you can see the bulk of them were a combination of consoles and of actual PCs and desktop computers. And the big change really happened in 2009 when we kind of redefined what a gaming platform was, and we redefined that by including, someone changed, Steve Jobs really changed the definition of a smartphone or phone into a smartphone and a smartphone into a gaming platform. And with that redefinition came a kind of tremendous shift in what actually happens. And this is kind of where we are today. And on that benchmark, you understand why it's a really, really exciting time for the gaming industry, because without us having really changed anything ourselves as content producers, we've had a whole world opened up to us, a new audience, a new chunk of time. Again, the distribution of app usage over the course of the day is very different to when people would come home and play console games in the past. So we have a tremendous opportunity that is still, as you can see, accelerating in terms of installed base, in terms of markets that are accessible, and in terms of platforms and functionality that is coming into everyone's pockets and being made available to the general public. So it's a really, really exciting time on that basis, and that's why, I mean, mobile is big for Google overall, and gaming is somewhere where we really enjoy investing and seeing the market grow overall. But when we dig into what we actually build in detail, you need to, apart from just saying, this is a good idea, the market is big, let's build some stuff, you need to think a little bit more about what we build and why. And this is where we wanted to look a little bit more into the details of what the users, and specifically what game players, actually have been doing and what they want to be doing. And to that end, we spent some time towards the end of last year with a third-party research firm. And this was actually, there's a lot of text on this slide explaining exactly what we did. But we basically partnered with Parks Associates, who are a third-party consumer survey firm, and went round and spoke to a lot of game players and app users. I'll focus on the game players here, in a variety of different markets, so covering some Western markets, the US, UK, France, I believe, and then China and Japan. So really trying to understand across the board what the differences are, what people's attitudes to games are, when they play them and why, and from that we've tried to work on what we should focus on and what we should help you focus on. So the first thing that came out when I went through what is really quite an extensive piece of research is a really interesting stat about what people would like to do and when. So this is an interesting question. I didn't write this. I wish I had done. It's a really good one to ask. What would you want to do if you have 5 minutes free? What are you going to do if you have half an hour free? And some of the text may be slightly small. Hopefully you can read it. You can see that the overall top one really is interact with social networks, and I don't think that's a surprise. But what you can see there is that is top for when you have 5 minutes, when you dip into something, little bite-sized interaction with your smartphone, the kind of bus stop usage we're all very familiar with. The really interesting thing here sits on that third line, which is play games. And 16% of people said it's the most likely thing they would do if they had 5 minutes free. But a third of people said it's the most likely thing they would do if they had half an hour free. And psychologically, that's quite a big difference and should really affect how we all feel about the content we're creating as game developers. Half an hour of free time is not a bite size, what shall I do now? Half an hour of free time is quality time. This is when games cross over from being a thing you do because you've got a couple of minutes to something you actively choose to do, something which becomes a bit of a hobby, something which you engage in thoroughly and in depth, which is really, really interesting on a couple of levels. One is it bodes really well for the content we're creating, and it really helps you guys realize you've got a lot of attention that you can capture from the market. And the second side is, as people start to get really engaged and spend a lot of time playing games, it really opens up the attractiveness of that space towards brand advertisers. And you think we've got a demographic now that is much more balanced than 30 years ago when it was teenage boys playing in arcades. I think some of us remember those times quite fondly. But the reality now is it's everybody playing games all the time. And coupled with high engagement, this is why we see a lot of interest from brands now in working out that this is a really engaged medium where they can spend money and reach people with a targeted message. And we've done a lot of work in the last few months basically rolling out engagement ads, the kind of video ads that we see on YouTube available to desktop games and applications for exactly this reason. And it was really nice to see this backed up, that people choose to spend quality time with games, and therefore that time, that content that you guys are creating, is very valuable. It was a really interesting thing to come out of this. And this is all UK data, by the way. Some of the cross-country comparisons come later. But the story is pretty consistent across the different markets. So, what type of apps do you use on your smartphone and tablet? I think there's no real surprise by vertical here. I think people know which are the most popular. That's available through any of the third-party analytics tools. What's interesting to see here is the kind of relentless popularity on everything apart from puzzle games, really, of tablet being a higher propensity to play games than on smartphone. So given that, it's very key that the tablet marketplace is somewhere to really win. And this kind of jives more with the previous slide as well, saying 30 minutes of time is more likely to be spent staring at a tablet than it is staring at a tiny smartphone. So on that basis, we can build more rich and more engaging experiences on tablet and take advantage of that time that people are willing to commit to playing games. So on top of that, delving further into the tablet side of things, again, probably not a massive surprise to those of us in the room who have built games or have seen the market data, is that the propensity to spend is higher on tablet. Now, there's not a great difference in kind of propensity to not spend. You can see that hovers around 50% in total. And this is amongst people who have played a lot of games in the last 30 days. Spending a little bit, roughly equal. Spending £6 to £10, a bit higher. And then what really makes the difference is when you look beyond that at more than £20. And that's where you see a marked difference in how many people are prepared to spend more than £20 on smartphone and how many people are prepared to spend more than £20 on tablet. And again, this indicates the likelihood of finding the guys we all want to be selling our games to, playing our game, or have playing our games, the whales who are willing to spend. Those guys are happier to spend more on tablets and that kind of slightly bigger, richer environment. And I don't doubt that the people who spend more are the ones who then engage more in the longer gameplay sessions, having invested more in the content that you've created. So again, no surprise, but a very consistent theme across the data that we've seen. And here's another interesting one, and this is one that I was really interested to see the results on. It's a little hard to read, so we can spend a bit of time on this slide. So this was reflecting on people's attitudes to the most recent games they downloaded and whether they were from a recognized brand that they knew, a company whose game they'd played before, or a company they'd heard of outside of a kind of a mobile gaming context, or whether they were from another company and it was just a purely app-based decision. So you can see on some cases, things like card and board games right down the end, it's actually very commoditized. And no one really cares who makes a solitaire game because it's very much about the game of solitaire. And as you get into some of the more focused games towards the end, I mean, casino games, there's a lot of trust involved in building those brands, but especially towards racing and sports and role-playing games, the time where people really feel a personal affinity with the content, where people have a strong brand association, they will have loyal followings, and actually in things like role-playing games and so on specifically, where you are likely to spend money and invest a lot of time, that there's an increased sensitivity to a game coming from a brand that you know and a company that they are familiar with. Also important in the middle is it's around kids and family as well, where this begins to shift. And given the importance and the natural adoption of touchscreen devices and tablets by children, I think building a strong brand that parents can trust is very important in reaching the kind of consumers who you really want to build a lifetime affinity with. So there's an interesting spectrum across there to see how important it is to build a brand. And I think as the App Store gets more and more crowded, we've seen several talks about discoverability, how best to cross-promote, and the reasons these things are effective is because there is this trust, this brand affinity that comes when there's a lot of noise and a lot of games. You kind of cling back to what you know. And what this says to me is it's well worth investing from your side in building as strong a game brand as possible to get as much mileage out of that, as much engagement from your users as you can, because it's something that's clearly important. And underscoring that again, and this was the most surprising thing I saw, looking at this data, again, that previous slide was just UK, but this is a cut across the various countries. And the split is pretty even. So the previous slide, looking back, you can see the average is probably about halfway in total across these different areas. So you see that reflected in most of the charts. But the big outlier here, the purple bar, is China. And what we found there is that actually brand affinity and playing from a brand that you know is massively more important when breaking into that market. And that's really interesting given, obviously, the size of the market and the challenges involved in localizing and tapping into it. And I think even the bigger companies who've been expanding across into the Asian markets have had to work really hard at localization to do so. But I think if that is a market you're targeting, this was one of the more interesting results that came out, because it makes it very clear that understanding the value of your brand and focusing on building that out is a better long-term strategy than just writing some games and hoping, because in that market in particular, you're at a disadvantage if you are an unknown quantity. So as you start approaching different markets and scaling internationally, it's definitely something to bear in mind. And especially if you're, I mean, kind of a really strong example here would be breaking into China with a role-playing game, one of the genres that was really sensitive to it on the previous slide. In that situation, you're really going to need some local help. You're really going to need to localize very well and adapt if you want to break into what is quite a kind of familiar and brand-driven market. So off the back of that, there are a few things that jumped out, and there's plenty more data in these decks. I believe we're going to publish them in full at some point soon, but I'm happy to discuss any of the results with people at any other time. But the three things that came out to me is that games continue to be the use case on these mobile devices. And there's plenty of other research in the decks about use of apps in general. Games are broken out specifically. But games continue to be the thing that people want to do, and they want to do it when they have time and they care, and it's quality time they spend with games, which is really encouraging for all of us, especially in this era of dismissing casual gaming. It's not serious. I'm sorry, it is. It's where people choose to spend their time when they have plenty of it. Tablet continues to be the platform on which you can gain the most revenue and the most engagement from users, where people spend an awful lot more time playing games. And when you're trying to do so, then engaging with your brand and engaging your consumers with your brand gives you a leg up in what is an increasingly crowded marketplace and a very difficult international marketplace. So what have we done off the back of this? I'm going to run through a few changes of things that people may not have been aware of that hopefully make sense in the context of those previous topics. So Tablets in particular. So we're seeing tremendous growth on Android with the tablet side of the market. And what we changed late last year is the tablet default view in the Google Play Store. So if you have a tablet now and you open up the Play Store, instead of it dropping onto the normal home page, it drops onto this page, which is the optimized for tablets home page. So the reality is, if you are building an app that works on tablets, but you haven't created the correct assets to make us aware that it's tablet specific, to upload tablet specific screenshots and things like that to display well in this format, you guys are going to be at a disadvantage in terms of basic visibility within the store. And we've done this because we believe that a tablet-based experience on a tablet is very different to a smartphone-based experience. And therefore, you should really be focusing on getting the basics done correctly. And subsequently, the tablet quality checklist, which is available on the Android developers site, is the next step to making sure you're getting the positioning you would like to have and the visibility we should see on the store if you have a tablet optimized game. And I hopefully, from the previous data, we all agree that we should have tablet optimized games. So on top of that, really engaging with your users. This is something we had a lot of flack about in the beginning. I remember getting asked about this plenty. The ability to reply to reviews on the Google Play Store. And the fact that you couldn't do this was a real challenge when a lot of people would, I don't know, frankly not read the instructions. They wouldn't realize that you're releasing a high-end game that's not going to work on a really low-end phone, and you'd get a lot of noise without the ability, right of reply. This wasn't great, and we fixed that a while back. The point is now, especially in the context of the brand survey that we did, it's important that you guys spend some time engaging with your users. If things are broken, fix them, use it as a support channel, really engage with the groups you have there, and start to get people responding and aware that you care about their experience with your game. And the follow-up again that you can follow through on here is we have the ability obviously now to build out trusted tester groups and do staged rollouts on Android to allow you to release updates in a staggered fashion and not break everything for everyone. If something goes wrong, it's going to hit 1% or 5% of your user base. And that's the kind of launch strategy you'd follow in any other circumstance, and we allow you to follow it on Android as well. So have a think about that launch process and the immediate support process afterwards, because that's valuable time spent engaging with your brand, and take advantage of the tools we have there. Build out groups of trusted testers, control your rollouts, control the feedback that comes in, and make sure you act on it, because in the long run, that's going to build a better group of users who trust your brand, pay attention to your game, and will be more likely to look when you try and cross-promote afterwards. Another way of doing this and making sure you engage is giving people a chance to log in. Nothing gaming specific on this slide, but looking at the Guardian, who are one of our launch partners with Google Sign-In, and Play Games is the equivalent for games and offers a whole bunch of really useful functionality around multiplayer stuff that I'll get to. But the brand and having a trusted way of signing in, knowing that it's a privacy-respecting way of engaging with your users. Google Plus has been really strongly received amongst a lot of major publishers as a trusted way of logging into the app and personalizing and following up afterwards. So on that basis, thoroughly recommend it as another way of building trust and engaging with your user base even more. And obviously, the specific way of doing so on games is with Play Games. We're trying to roll out as much as we can there to simplify your life. And I think on the first categorization, I put it under engagement, but there is an aspect of it which comes under build. We allow you guys to do multiplayer off a basic framework, to not worry about leaderboards, to not worry about matchmaking, to not worry about achievements. Very simple to set them up, very easy to centrally administer. So take advantage of all of these things. And just on a personal plea, please use Cloud Save. I've stopped playing about 5 games after Christmas. I got a new tablet. My progress just didn't come with me, and I'm not doing it again, and I've stopped playing your game. In terms of basic engagement, it's almost like hygiene now. It's really simple to set up, and it's really painful when it's not there. So thinking back in terms of engagement and brand, knowing that you can pick a game up and it's stateless and you take it with you is actually becoming more and more important. I know personally it's a real irritation if it doesn't happen. So think about that in the context of the brand engagement and start taking advantage of those tools as well, because they're going to be really helpful and help you avoid a lot of bad will. Cross-promotion, I think, is the obvious way, and there have been plenty of talks about it from various different providers around how best to take advantage of this. I think it's a pretty simple principle now for people, sometimes hard to execute, but especially, again, in the context of brand building and loyal user bases, make sure you're engaging with people. If they leave your app, find ways of bringing them back in. If they're heavy users of your app, find ways of rewarding them. Show them fewer ads, don't show them any ads. Build that structure into your game, and you'll start kind of rewarding your users and building much more of a trusted relationship with them overall. And then something else we can do to provide transparency and engagement, make sure you're getting the most out of what's going on. We launched late last year an integration between the analytics side of our business and the Google Play Store. So if you have an analytics account, if you're working with Play, then you can link those two together, and we can give you analytics on the bounce rates and so on that you guys have seen from the Google Play page itself, help you optimize the listing, help you make sure it's attractive to your users, and understand what's happening, whether people are converting or not, based on what's going on in the store. And this is a pretty unique functionality that I think is, if you can improve that single point of transaction, do I click install or not, based on what I see on the store, if you can improve that by a few percent, then obviously that comes straight off your cost of user acquisition. It comes straight off the blocks to virality for your game. So please take advantage of that. It's something we've kind of built in and worked quite hard with the analytics team to create. So those are the main things I wanted to run through as new pieces there. Again, as I said, I wanted to try and give some background rather than just here's a list of features. Hopefully the data's interesting there to help you understand why we've built the features we have, and hopefully give you some good reasons to take advantage of it, and hopefully drive even greater distribution, even greater revenue, greater engagement from your players off the stuff you can do and what we can help you with here at Google and on Android. So I have plenty of time for any questions, I think. Tanil has not kicked me out yet. So if we have a few minutes if everyone wants to discuss anything off that or kind of on different topics. Stunned silence. Excellent.
I actually have a question, Ross. Can you share some insights on soft launching on Google Play? We get asked all the time, like which markets, what are the main KPIs to be successful on that period of time where we're just testing the game?
So I think what we're hearing pretty regularly is that people are going for similar markets. I hear like cost of acquisition in Canada is getting quite competitive because it's the closest analog to the US. And I think that's definitely something worth doing. I think a lot of people have seen it work quite well. I think there's definite advantages in doing that. I would say as you roll out over time, what might be a more efficient way of doing things is identifying your heavy users. And as I say, there's a kind of almost like a trusted tester program you could administer through the Play Store where people can join, I think it's basically join a Google group effectively that you administer. And those guys will be able to get new versions. You can release them through a private channel, basically, to those guys. And if they're heavy users of your apps, if they like the first game and you're trying to release the second one, and you want to get controlled feedback from a detailed group of people, if soft launching is getting harder in these markets where everyone's following that test in a kind of English or North American environment, then there's an alternate channel there to really engage with your heavy users, build a relationship with those advocates. If you get it wrong, they will forgive you because you're actually engaging with them to find out if it's wrong. And that's something that I think you can spend a bit of time doing and get a lot of benefit from.
Yeah. Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yep. Tanil's coming with the mic.
I was wondering if you have, the data is very interesting. I was wondering if you have it broken down by geography as well, that if, in terms of the users and preferred time and how they spend their time and all of this stuff.
So each one of those individual slides, we have the data for each of the 5 markets that we sampled, yeah. So if you have a specific question afterwards, we take some details and I can try and find that answer somewhere in the decks.
Okay, great, thanks.
No other questions? All right. Thank you so much, Ross.
No, thank you very much, guys.